Okay, so we studied price based multiples as a valuation technique in the last lecture. So these two videos are basically going to cover um, a summarized version of what we studied in the last lecture. So we start off with the basic principle. So price multiples are primarily ratios of a stock's price to some measure of the value per share. So the first thing that you need to remember that price multiples are a ratio of the price to some measure of value, right? So we put something in the denominator which should be a useful predictor of the price of the stock. And what are the three measures of value that we've studied? Earning, book value of equity, and sales. Okay, so these are the three price multiples that we've studied in class. We'll look at them individually in a minute. So price multiples are primarily used in the field of valuation to compare an asset or a stock with a benchmark value. So this benchmark can be the average of the, let's say, price to earnings of the industry. That can be one benchmark. So if the P/E of the company that we are analyzing is higher as compared to the average P/E of the industry, then we, just on the basis of this information, we may deduce that this stock is overvalued. Or this benchmark could also be the historical PE of the same firm. So when we are comparing the firm's current performance in terms of its stock price with its historical performance, then we will be comparing the current P/E with the historical P/Es of the same stock in order to see whether over time the stock has become more overvalued or undervalued. So the rationale for P/E, P/S, price to book value, and all other price based multiples is the law of one price, which basically means that earnings, $1 of earnings should be valued at the same level across the industry. So if in the FMCG sector you've got two companies, Nestle and let's say Agro Foods, and we know that both the companies have an earnings per share of $10, again hypothetical, and based on the law of one price, the market should be willing to pay a similar price for both companies, ceteris paribus, keeping all else constant, right? Similarly for sales, if let's say the sales of the company are $100 and the same is the case here, then the price to sales ratio should be the same as well. If let's say the sales number is $200, even then the ratio of price to this number should be the same, right? And lastly, price to book value. Again, for each dollar of book value, the price that the market is willing to pay should be the same for similar companies across the same industry. The main idea behind the use of price to earnings is that earning power of a company is the chief driver of investment value, and earning per share is probably the primary focus of security analysts' attention. So earnings per share is the most important variable that the analysts are looking at, and it is deemed to be the primary predictor of the or primary driver of the investment value in the stock. But a problem with P/E is that while it is the most commonly used measure for stock valuation, earnings, as you know, is subject to a lot of distortions. These can be accounting related distortions. So again, we know that based on the various interpretations of accounting rules, earnings across companies can be substantially different based on the assumptions that are taken to calculate those earnings. And then sometimes there is a cyclicality concern with respect to earnings. So a company may have been performing very well for the last 5 years, but because there is an overall downturn in the economy or this specific sector, then the earnings have gone down. So when you look at the P/E of the stock at this point in time, it might seem that the earnings are at a low point, and maybe P/E is if it had the price has not fallen in the same proportion, then the price to earnings ratio may be temporarily high. Let me repeat this. So if earnings have gone down only temporarily due to a temporarily cyclicality that the industry is experiencing, then then at the same time, if the price of the stock has not come down, then temporarily the P/E will have gone up. So there is significant distortion in the earnings that companies experience, and as a result of that, as analysts, we need to be wary of this phenomenon. What we do in order to ensure that our valuations are not affected by the variations in earnings, we use two methods to normalize earnings. So we normalize, which is another term for removing the temporary kinks and bumps in the earnings, and we find a sort of average of the earnings in the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years, whatever is the appropriate horizon, right? So there are two methods of normalizing earnings. One is simply averaging the earnings per share, and the other is averaging the return on equity that the firm has been earning. So we'll look at examples of both of these in the upcoming video. Right. So at this point in time, we're finishing this video, but we will be continuing with price to sales, price to book value, and the respective examples of these ratios in the coming video.